This is the Integrated and Designated ELD mini lesson for exploring environments through fossils and making inferences by Becca White and Sandy Lule. The designated ELDs focused on making inferences. The objective of the lesson is students will be able to make inferences based on evidence by engaging in dialogue with peers. The standard for this lesson is offering and supporting opinions and negotiating with others in communicative exchanges. This lesson is designed for fourth graders. Some materials we'll need for the lesson are evidence and inference T-chart, career word bank with pictures, sentence frame chart, and pictures of tools. As a classroom management note, it might be a fun idea to include real tools for students to physically touch and hold. If real tools are used, I would make sure to still include pictures for the board work. I would also need to remind my students about being respectful with the equipment and staying focused on the task at hand. The tools would be used for observing, not for playing. In the front-loading portion of the lesson, I will front-load students by providing them with a visual word bank and pictures to remind them of various occupations. I will have sentence frames for making inferences posted on the board as well. This is just a really simplified version of some pictures of occupations with explicit words written along the bottom. In the UDL for the lesson, students work together on the rug with a partner and individually while sitting at their desks. Students are provided regular feedback as I walk around the room and monitor classroom discussion. And students are given sentence frames with varying levels of difficulties. In my anticipatory set, I will ask students to pretend that they've never met me and are walking into my workplace for the first time. I will ask them to tell me by looking around the room for clues how they might know what I do for work. In the direct instruction portion, I will write the items students observed in the evidence column of my T-chart and draw an arrow to the inference side and then write a sentence. I will also post a picture of the clues in the evidence column and a picture of the career students inferred. On the right is just an example of what this chart might look like with evidence in the first column and inference in the second column. I see pencils, crayons, and scissors, so I think that Miss White is a teacher. I will explain to students how we use evidence from what we observe to make inferences about something. I will repeat the words evidence and inference and point to the T-chart while showing them how I went from something that I observed, the evidence, to something that I think is true, the inference. To make it more clear, I will explain and explicitly write that evidence can also mean clues or details. I will say how we use clues to make a prediction or a guess about something. I will use the words in a sentence using the example, my inference is, I think the pencil belongs to a teacher. My evidence is that you need a pencil to do classwork. Some anticipated misconceptions for this lesson are that students might not initially understand that an inference does not have to be correct to be valid. So in my lesson, I'll remind students that inferences are only predictions based on evidence from what we observe, but this does not necessarily make them true. I can do this by showing them how some evidence might lead me to draw a different conclusion. The more evidence I have, the closer to a more accurate inference I will make. If I see scissors, I might infer that this person is a hairdresser. If I see scissors, a ruler, and notebooks, I might infer that this person is a teacher. For supporting a positive classroom environment, prior to having students discuss with partners, I will remind them that it is not about being right, but about practicing making inferences. I will also remind them that it is important to listen to their partners respectfully. This means that they are looking at their eyes when they're listening, their body is facing the student, and their mouth is closed when one student is speaking. I will tell students it's important that every student completes his or her sentence before the other speaks. This helps my struggling ELD students who may need more time to get their point across. So while sitting in a group on the rug, I begin by showing students a picture of different tools that are labeled and asking them to think about what kind of person uses them. I will also ask students to think about why they thought those items belonged to that career and to discuss their thoughts with a peer using the modeled sentence frames. This gives students verbal practice with the language. In my check for understanding, while students are working with their partners, I will be walking around the room to monitor student interactions and to ensure that they're using the sentence frames correctly. This is my opportunity to check in, especially on my struggling ELD students. Here are some examples of some modeled sentence frames I might use in my lesson. So I know blank needs this tool too, so I think this person is A. Another sentence is, my inference is blank, my evidence is blank, and I can infer that this tool belongs to a blank based on the evidence that blank. I will call on students to place the pictures of tools in the evidence column of the charts while having them tell me one of the inferences they made using the sentence structure. I will ask other students if they agree or disagree. I will write students' inferences in the inference column of the chart corresponding to the evidence they posted. So here's an example of handcuffs in the evidence with an arrow. I think this person is a police officer. A sentence a student might use is, I can infer that the tool belongs to a police officer based on the evidence that police need handcuffs to arrest people. In students' independent work, after they've had oral practice with the sentence frames and have worked with their partners, I will have them go back to their desks and work independently to fill out their own inference and evidence T-charts. Then they will write out the sentences they came up with for each picture under their graphic organizers. I will challenge students to use all 3 different sentence frames, but tell them that it is not required. This gives students a choice in their learning and also eliminates pressure for the emerging students. I will walk around the class to offer support and to check in on students who may need more help. In the lesson wrap-up, at the end of the lesson, I will introduce pictures of tools used by paleontologists. I will tell them that they will be acting as paleontologists in the next lesson and will be using tools like them to do something. I will ask students to infer what paleontologists might do and write down a sentence frame to reflect on later after they've completed their fossil dig activity. In assessing student progress for this lesson, ongoing check-ins with the students and reviewing their written sentence frames will act as an informal assessment of their comprehension. The end of the lesson will also tell me how well students are grasping the concept based on how they respond to the final discussion on paleontologists. The scaffolding that takes place in this lesson are the visual charts and modeled sentence frames. The word bank at the beginning also helps get students thinking about careers and different tools each uses. Students learn by first hearing the language, then writing the language written explicitly, getting to practice it orally, and finally by getting practice writing using the language. I will challenge students who are succeeding by letting them choose more complex tools to draw inferences on. I will give them pictures of tools they have most likely never seen before and make it like a game to have them really take a guess at what those tools might be used for. When I reviewed these challenge pictures with the whole class, this would help to solidify the idea inferences are predictions and are not necessarily true. Some educational theories and theorists included in the lesson. The sentence frames provide clear scaffolding, an idea by Vygotsky, for students in learning to create inferences. Because inferences are made by combining schema with evidence, this lesson is also in line with constructivist theories of Piaget, which is based on the premise that we all construct our own perspective of the world based on individual experience and schema, and focuses on preparing the learner to problem solve. This lesson also pulls from Krashen's theories about positive affective domains. Students are in a low stress, accepting, and encouraging environment, are provided with adequate wait time, and are engaged in student-to-student interactions. So that is the wrap up for the designated lesson, and then we'll move on to the integrated lesson.
So the materials I will need for this lesson is Jello, and I have seen in a few observations, and also Becca and I talked about this, that if we're going to have any type of food within a lesson, we should have a separate section for just enjoyment and the other one used for the lesson. And so I'll have a Jello for both eating and for the lesson, and I'll need tweezers, beads, cups, napkins, and copies of a close read. So the lesson standard is fourth grade, third section, subset B, and its students know that in particular environment, some kind of plants and animals survive well, and some survive less well, and some cannot survive at all. My I can would be I can identify particular environments and plants and animals that survive well and those that don't. My front loading for my lesson will be that students will be reminded of the different types of environments. This is a lesson that's going off of a previous lesson that has already been talked about. And so there will be a little bit of review of the different environments such as desert, grassland, mountains, and rainforest. The students will need instructions on handling the Jello. Therefore, I will take just 5 minutes discussing the etiquette of handling the Jello and the consequences of if the Jello is not handled correctly. And I will also talk about our anchor chart that we have worked on previous lessons as well, which include the statements of I agree, I disagree, I think, I know, I believe, I understand where you're coming from, but, and etc. And these will all have to deal with refuting or agreeing with inferences or claims made. Any misconceptions that will be anticipated during my lesson are that students might want to eat the Jello even though it was specifically told not to be eaten. So I will make sure that even right before we even start handling the Jello, I will remind them again that it is not to be eaten. And also, students might get confused with the color beads. Therefore, I will provide a legend of color beads, of which beads correlate with which color and what animal belongs to that color, and each of them will get a legend for that. And also, students might not understand how to conduct themselves properly in a conversation. There will be a chance for students in this lesson to state their claim, and other students will be able to either agree or refute that. Therefore, I will make sure that we talk about a social contract and appropriate behavior within conversations and respecting other people's claims and inferences. Any flexible workspaces, students will have a choice of where to work during independent practice. For this lesson, it'll be with their table groups, but within their table groups or the groups that they'll be assigned to, they'll be able to work in an area within the classroom. Also, I'll be giving regular feedback during their independent section and as well as their group discussions. And there will also be digital and audio text options. There will be an option to watch a video of different environments if need be. My anticipatory set would be for the table groups to complete a puzzle. Each table group will have a different environment and a different animal to create. The puzzle would be based on grassland, desert, rainforest, and mountains. Once the puzzles are complete, each group will share with the class on which puzzle they completed. Once we share all the puzzles, we'll go into a small discussion of which animals will live in a certain environment and which would not survive. And then during the direct instruction sequence, I will go over the anticipatory set first, then I'll go into the I can statement, and then I'll go over the agenda of what we will be doing for that lesson. So what I will do, then what they will do, and then what we will do. I know it's I do, we do, they do, but for this specific lesson, it's a little out of order. It'll be I do, they do, and then we do. And then I'll also remind students of having a respectful conversation with their peers. And I'll go over phrases one can use to support their observation and claims based on their inferences. Lastly, I will go over the phrases one can use to support their observation and claims based on inferences, and this will be when I talk about the front loading of the anchor charts of the I agree, disagree, I think, I know, I believe. So for my I do, which I model, so during this time, I'll be doing a close read of different environments and animals within the environments. With the close read, I'll read it 3 times. The first time I'll go through and read as students follow along. The second time as I read, I will have students highlight words or ideas that they do not understand. The third time, I will read and answer or explain any questions or words students may have. My check for understanding is I will have a few students give me something they learned from the close read. Now for my they do, once we have discussed and reviewed our close read, it will be, the close read will correlate with the they do activity, which is where during the independent instruction, students will be working by themselves. I'll explain that each student is going to have their own cup of black jello with beads located inside of them. Each bead will have a color, and those colors will represent an animal. I'll provide a legend for each animal. For example, a green bead might equal a lizard, and a yellow bead might equal cacti, or a red bead will equal bunnies, and etc. I will then explain that each member from each table group will have a different type of environment. In other words, no same 2 environments will be within a group. They'll be given a few minutes to quietly and independently dissect their jello. They'll be given a sheet of paper with a sentence template. Example, I think I have blank environment because blank, that they will fill in to make their inferences based on their observations. My checking for understanding during the they do will be I will be walking around and giving feedback and watch students write. If I see that a student is struggling to understand what is expected of them or having a hard time to understand the concept, I'll be able to know which student needs extra help with achieving the standard. For the we do, this is where we all come back together as a class. During this time, we'll come back as a whole class and we'll make a mark on the board of how many students had a tropical environment and a mountain environment and so on. Once I made a note of which students observed which environments, I will have those students get together in a group to discuss what they observed. This is where they can use their sentence builders to help them support their claim, and students are able to question a claim. Before they get into groups, I will emphasize that they need to be respectful. They need to be respectful in conversations. Then we will go back to whole class instruction. I will have each group present their claims and evidence based from their inferences. I will allow other groups to refute their claims. Once done, I will step in and add any more details that need to be added to each claim to provide a clearer picture. My check for understanding during the we do will be based on their interactions amongst their group. If I see they are participating and able to hold a conversation. My assessment will be within the lesson. The papers that they fill out during their independent time will be what I use to assess the students. My scaffolding ideas that I have for my struggling or EL students will be I will provide sentence templates, such as the template they use during their independent study. Example, I think I have blank environment because blank. And then I will allow students to participate in groups and talk amongst peers, which will help some students feel like they can participate if they are within groups and their peers rather than speaking just to the class. And I will also provide a legend for students that need a visual of colorful beads. As I explained, each bead represents a different color and a different animal. Therefore, my scaffolding will be that I will provide a legend for each student. That way, each student understands what is expected. My extension ideas for students who demonstrate understanding would be for students that are understanding the concept, I will expect them to use more complex sentence starters. I concur with that statement because I hear your claim, however, that's a good idea, but and as well as for their sentence builders, I might add a little bit more complex sentence structures, such as I infer that I have blank environment because blank. My theorists that are represented during this lesson are Vygotsky. He handles mainly scaffolding. So I provide scaffolding for all my students, not only the struggling and the EL students, because I provide sentence builders and visuals for both students. Also, Burner. This lesson expands from the year prior because students would have been introduced into ecosystems in 3rd grade. I am now adding more to that content. And Piaget, I am adding to what students already know from prior knowledge of animals and giving context and structure to it. Thank you for listening to our presentation. I hoped you learned a lot about integrated and designated lessons from our video as much as we did completing this assignment. And thank you.